Thanks so much for coming here. Today public talk will be dedicated to the humanitarian missions in the conflict zone and, to be specific, hospital work under the bombings and shootings. So we have a special guest today. It's Dr. Tankred Stoebe, former President of MSF Germany, who has a huge experience in this field. And today's session will be moderated by Nikita Minyaev, Associate Professor of Sechun University. So what kind of challenges humanitarian face in the conflict zone? Who provides safety, security aid workers? How's the organization like MSF, Doctors Without Borders, deal with the consequences? All these questions and other questions will be answered by my colleagues. So Nikita, I'll give the floor to yours, and after Nikita's presentation, Mr. Tankred will speak with his. So thanks so much.
Good evening, everyone. It's a real pleasure to me to here with you, and I'm glad to present Dr. Tankred Stoebe. I believe that one of the most experienced doctors in disaster medicine field. He supports the victim of both natural disaster as well as armed conflict all around the world. For example, in Libya, Somalia, Yemen, Pakistan, Sierra Leone, Nepal, Indonesia, and missed nothing? No. I want to stress that his human right to the health means that everyone has a right to the highest attained standards of physical and mental health, which include access to all medical services, sanitation, education, adequate food, and etc. During armed conflict and natural disaster, a big problem for people that they cut from access to medical healthcare services. It means that short-term and long-term consequences. And according to the WHO, I want to show some figures about how many attacks occur every year all around the world. This is World Health Organization statistics about this issue. Okay, according to the World Health Organization defines an attack on health care as any act of verbal or physical violence or obstruction of threat or violence that interfere with the availability, access, and delivery of curative and or preventive health services during emergency. Look at this 4-year comparative data. Unfortunately, we find that great number of attacks occur every year, great number of doctors injured and unfortunately deaths during such kind of attack. And this is why, for example, in Sechun University, we teach about healthcare and danger project, how to protect doctors and nurses in fragile settings. And I'm very glad that Dr. Tankred today might illustrate and share his experience, how it work in such fragile settings. Okay. Dr. Tankred, please, your step.
Yeah, Dr. Nikita, dear ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to me to be here tonight with you, and I'm quite aware that we don't know each other and we jump into one of the most crucial issues MSF has to deal with all over the world. So it's exciting, but it's also, I'm hoping that for the next few minutes discussing with you that we find sort of a common understanding about those dilemmas, and we are particularly interested to share our concerns because we believe only by discussing and exchanging ideas we will find maybe sort of there are not really good solutions, but at least sort of an improvement of the current situation. As Dr. Nikita just said, it's a problem. If we look at those numbers, it's not going away. It's increasing, and as we will learn in the next hour or so, the problem is not nothing new. Hospitals have always been bombed. Aid workers have been attacked, but there is a new dimension to it in the last couple of years, as we see, and we are very much concerned because, as we will learn, this makes not only our life difficult, which is clear, but also people concerned in those countries. It's probably the worst that can happen to them. Once you're in a hospital, you're very vulnerable, even more than you are as civilians, and if you're bombed in a hospital, it's probably one of the most difficult things to endure. Can we go back to... Okay, I did prepare something because normally we talk about bombings on hospitals, but of course shootings inside hospital is another issue, and this is what I experienced myself, and it's sort of, both not very comfortable, but just wait for a second. And for me, the experiences, I mean, I'm lucky, otherwise I wouldn't be here. And the good news is, even so it does happen, and patients are killed, doctors are killed, of course it remains a very rare occurrence in the overall work of MSF. Fortunately, this is nothing that happens on a daily basis that we lose colleagues, but it happens far too often not to make it a major issue. This picture was taken in northern Iraq. It's on the border to Syria in 2013, and it was interesting because I thought this was going to be a very easy and calm summer, because when I accepted to go on that mission, it was clear the border between Syria and Iraq would be closed. So I thought, well, that's going to be nothing much to do, but with the time of arrival in northern Iraq, this border opened, and within 4 weeks, more than 60,000 Syrians came over that border, and we had a little tent on that hill where we had a good view over to Syria and could see every single man, woman or child crossing over to Iraq. And sometimes, as we see here, we went down and negotiated with the soldiers to let those, specifically those injured or pregnant women, pass through easily. Before we go into this, I brought a quote with me which comes from ICRC. As you know, MSF doctors who worked with ICRC in the early 1970s created then MSF with the notion of speaking out, and Peter Maurer, the current ICRC president, made the statement that the rules of war establish limits. Wars without limits are wars without end. And wars without end mean endless suffering. We must never allow ourselves to become numb to human suffering. I think there's hardly anyone probably who can contradict to this here or oppose to this. But of course, living with their daily consequences is a different story. I give you a short sort of intro about what MSF is and does. So I said it was created in the early 1970s, and we do the medical assistant, but also bearing witness. So that's one distinction from MSF to ICRC, that we do speak out. We don't always speak out. We don't speak out about everything we see. So this is a tool we use in certain situations, like tonight. So it started, as you know from the name, in France, but today it's a global movement. We have offices and sections in more than 20 countries around the globe. We have 5 operational centers, and we have a budget of 1.5 billion euro, and currently about 47,000 staff. 90% of them are locally hired. And our income also now is almost completely private donations that developed over the years. So we started up about 50-50, and over the years then it became 30-20%, and now we are almost at 100% private funding. This is important for us because we believe the independence of the organization is crucial. If we look at where we work, currently we are active in more than 70 countries, about 450 projects, and these shows here a little bit those circles where we are. So the majority of the projects of MSF are in Sub-Saharan Africa, also Southeast Asia, Central America. We are here now. We have a little program up north here where we treat multiple resistant tuberculosis. But of course, we also have some activities in Italy, Greece, the Balkans for refugees. But of course, the main activities are outside of Europe. And last year, we treated 11 million patients in outpatient condition, and we admitted over 750,000 people inside the clinics where we work. So what's the humanitarian action in the way how we understand it? It's unconditional assistance to those in greatest need, regardless of their religion, culture, politics. Here we could add gender and age, but that's very inclusive. Humanitarian aid, as we understand it, it is peaceful in nature, but it's not anti-militarist. There was a time in our history when even MSF called for a military intervention, which you maybe remember that was in Rwanda during the genocide, when we clearly stated doctors cannot stop a genocide. As we also know, there wasn't a military intervention stopping the killing, at least not in the beginning. For me, very important, when I go to the field and get confused sometimes with the politics, I ask myself not who's right in this war, but who needs aid because of that war. For me, this is a very healthy statement that helps me to concentrate on the medical work, even more because I know that humanitarian aid is not a solution to the conflict, but it's essential action, medical humanitarian action, in the absence of a political solution. And specifically in those very political contexts, be it Syria, Yemen, Palestine, where it's very difficult to keep politics out. For me, this is helpful as a doctor to concentrate on the medical act. So, we still, we are sometimes blamed being a conservative organization, still holding on to those humanitarian principles, but we believe every day they are useful, they are crucial, and so humanity, it's clear, impartiality, assistance based on need. So yes, we take sides to those who are most in need, most vulnerable, usually also the poorest. That's why we don't take any fees. Every medical care we do worldwide is for free, because in our experience, even the smallest fee would scare away or would allow those in big need not to come. And that's why we are clear on that. The independence is not only because of our resources, but also the independence in our decision making. Whenever we decide to intervene into an area, we not doing it based on a call of a state to help, but our own independent evaluation. So we send in a small team doing an evaluation, and then based on their findings, we decide if or if not we go and work there. And of course, observing neutrality, and that's interesting because this is sometimes in contradiction to speaking out. So the neutrality, and that's one difference between ICRC and MSF. ICRC takes that very seriously. That's why they speak out less than maybe MSF does. Over the years, of course, we are dealing a lot with armed actors anywhere in the world. As you know, more than half of our programs are in armed conflicts. So it is wise for us to find established ways to communicate, but not so much to communicate how to collaborate, but to communicate how to make clear what the differences are. So we talk to all military and armed actors in a conflict, which is essential for us to explain what we just discussed here. So the principles, the way of work. We do sort of inform them what we do, our activities and how we work. There is a chain of command for problem solving. We sometimes even can share or hand over patients from one facility to another. This is possible, but we would, in an armed conflict, we would never use the logistics of an armed actor, because even if we don't collaborate, using or sharing same logistics we believe we would be viewed or perceived as taking sides with one of those actors. International humanitarian law, for us this is still a very valid concept, and it shows, it clearly sort of brings up sort of ways of how we should behave in an armed conflict. It clearly says sort of what about medical services, medical personnel, and most states on this planet have signed international humanitarian law agreements. So in theory, it should be all clear. So wounded and sick, of course, get treated, medical duties, who is doing that, medical ethics, who are also usually global. There is no medical ethic in one country which are invalid for the other. And of course, prohibition of intentional attack. Yeah, we come back to that in a little while. What is sort of, if we lose that protection, and then of course using the identification. And there are many conflicts where MSF we are choosing not to use our identification in order for protection. Yeah? So sometimes for us we feel it's safer to go a little bit sort of low profile. So the distinction between military and civilian actors should be easy regarding to international humanitarian law. Yeah? So military actor should behave and distinct from the civil. That's a clear ask by the international humanitarian law, while humanitarian actors have to be seen as distinct from the military and on the side of the civilian and behave accordingly. Yeah? So as in many areas, yeah, when theory is clear, it's being blurred by reality. Yeah? Or when we see in the day-to-day work, it becomes much more difficult. So the concept of states or military in a conflict is, of course, there is more and more sort of a combination that military actor don't say we just do the military act here, but we do sort of a humanitarian component, a peace-building component, any other thing. Yeah. And of course, they're not impartial in basis of needs. Of course, for any army to treat their soldiers comes first, and that's totally okay. Yeah, that's their mandate. But it is different to a humanitarian mandate. Also, sort of the objectives of war and the political thing with that, yeah, they have a clear political mandate what they want to achieve here, which is different to us. And it gets more, of course, complicated because to give aid is conditional. Yeah? In many places, only one part of the conflict will be giving support, and even more complicated, more and more private militaries or rebel groups come up, which are difficult to distinguish on which side they are, which command they do follow. And then we see more and more also non-combat military units, private organizations who are attached to militaries, taking over their logistics partly or fully. So it gets even more complicated to maneuver inside a conflict area. Our concept, and maybe I spend a little time on that, is so our security, we say it's a negotiated security or negotiated access. So by talking to all parties of a conflict, military or not, and explaining what we do and saying that we treat everyone and that we are not taking sides, in theory it should be clear that we are nobody's enemy, yeah, and that we are accepted anywhere in a conflict, yeah, because we are not part of that conflict, even so we are working in that conflict. And this may sound maybe sort of easy, yeah, to talk to all conflict parties, but in reality this is quite difficult. First of all, you have to know what military parties are involved in the conflict, and if we look at modern conflicts today in the world, even that task is quite challenging. There are conflicts where it's even hard for those who are involved in that conflict to name all the different conflict parties, and then to talk to each of them, yeah, and then once we believe, okay, we have established a good understanding in a certain area, we realize that one commander will change, the next one will change, and we have to start negotiating and discussing all over again. So this is still for us the best way to work, Of course, the other one is the quality of our work. The best business card we can give out is a good functioning clinic. It's good doctors and nurses and logisticians who save lives and relieve suffering. If we mess up on that, nothing will help us. Yeah? We are very clear on that. Yeah? So no matter how good we negotiate access to something, yeah, our medical act, our medical profession, that's the number one judgment call for everywhere in the world we work. We do not accept any weapons in hospitals or armed transports. Unarmed transport? No, armed transport. Of course. Interestingly, when I was in Libya the first time in 2016, in Benghazi, it took me weeks to negotiate in the hospital that we have no arms there. First, it was a very strange concept to them because they felt, yeah, our soldiers walk in there with weapons and that's totally normal. Even so, patients were injured, patients were killed inside the hospital by stray bullets. So this was quite a lengthy task for me to convince the security people. When we returned back to Afghanistan in 2009, one of the longest acts for us to come back was to make sure that the hospitals we support are weapon-free. Because of course Afghanistan, as you know, is a country where the use of weapon is quite a normal thing on an everyday level, but we believe, and our experience is that only a weapon-free hospital is a place where patients feel safe, where doctors and nurses feel safe, and where we don't have additional casualties created within the hospital. We do uphold the humanitarian principles, yeah, because as an operational necessity, we believe that's crucial. Yeah, so of course being credible, yeah, staying to the word. Yeah, if we say we do open this hospital, it's open 24 hours a day, yeah, so people can trust what we do. They do get the experience there that it is worth coming to the hospital. I've worked in many hospitals around the world where the quality of care was so bad that I could understand if patients don't come, yeah, because they say, why should I travel for 2 days to get to this hospital when I can also die at home? You know? Except it doesn't cost me anything more to travel and being on the road. So again, here the medical quality is crucial for us. Yeah, of course, and that's yeah, parties of conflict respect rules of war and rules of law, and we see that this has been better in the past. Yeah? So since the past 4 or 5 years, we see a deterioration of that principle. To give you one example, I skipped quite a few, but this one is something I experienced myself when I was in Pakistan, and back in 2011, and you maybe remember there was a Pakistani doctor who went from house to house sampling DNA samples, and he said he does need it for vaccination, for polio vaccination. But indeed, it had nothing to do with polio. It had only to do to find Osama bin Laden at that time. And you would say, well, yeah, maybe that's good or bad, but it had a story. Yeah? Interestingly, sort of around that time, Leon Panetta, who was head of the CIA at that time and later became a defense secretary, he quoted in an interview with CBS, this doctor, this Pakistani doctor, in fact helped provide intelligence that was very helpful with regards to this operation. He was not doing anything that would in any way undermine Pakistan security. So, fast forward, yeah, a year later, in November, Time magazine quoted, in Pakistan, aid can't get to areas like Balochistan, a hotbed of infection, because the local Taliban has been targeting anti-polio workers ever since the US tried using an immunization team to track Osama bin Laden. So very clearly, a medical act that was used in the first place, but abusing or misusing medical act for this, yeah, had consequences. Yeah. Maybe not alone, yeah, but clearly there was seen a connection. And then another year later, or half a year later, Time again quote, local Taliban groups have obstructed anti-polio workers. The number of cases in Pakistan rose 60% last year. So there's a clear connection that by blurring the line, yeah, and that's what we call out again and again, please, you military actor, do your job, yeah, we don't interfere, but stick to your mandate and don't use sort of medical or humanitarian issues to get your security or your sort of military operation going, yeah, because the civilian will suffer, and I found that is one of the clearest examples I could find when that line is blurred. Now I come and share some experience from us. This was in the very early stages of the crisis in Syria. Actually, we were the second team of MSF going into Syria. That was in 2012. And these are the Akrat Mountains. And what you see here, this is not dust because it was a dry area. No, there was constant bombing. And this is the area here. It's about 300 square kilometers. There were 30 villages around here, 50,000 people living there. There were 2 tanks outside that part bombing constantly into this area. We heard many stories from doctors in that area. They said, well, we losing a lot of civilians who are getting injured and trying to get north into Turkey. But they couldn't because their injuries are so heavy and they're bleeding to death, and we need a surgical team who can help them, at least stabilize them, so they can carry on further into Turkey. That's why we decided to come into that area, and they also showed us an area and said that is a cave which is pretty safe because you can work in there, and even if there's some bombing, it will be okay for you to work there. So we decided to go into this area. And this is the entrance of that cave. There's only a small door, and it was very well camouflaged. There was a big tree over that thing, so you had to go very close to that cave in order to actually see it. This is from inside the cave, so the challenge for us, and we were the first team to actually install a clinic in that cave, and it was a challenge for us because normally we build hospitals in tents, or but I don't think in our history of MSF we ever changed a cave into a hospital. So I was very interested how that would look like. This cave had 2 layers. Yeah, we had an upper layer which is here, and I show you some pictures here. So we put the emergency room there. We put also some pre and post operative benches there. But of course, before that, we had to renovate that. Yeah? So we hired some people. We put a flat floor in there. We put all these, what you see here, yeah? All these plastic sheeting here, because of course it was a cave and constantly dropping of water and dust there. And we could install 8 benches here. We have had material here. And then in the lower part of that cave, yeah, which you see here, we installed an inflatable tent, which was very helpful because there in that tent we could, and that's the picture here, yeah, we had an operating table here, and we could create a sterile environment there, which was very helpful for us to do really clean surgery, which is of course essential. And by setting up this little hospital, and of course there is no media that was indicating that help was there, but of course the spread of word mouth by mouth was very quick, yeah, so we could use that for quite some time until the bombings even onto that cave became more and more frequent and heavy. And after I left the next team, they showed me pictures of a crater, of a deep crater just before the cave. And then eventually they decided it's not safe to work in that cave anymore, so they decided to move that clinic out of that cave closer to the Turkish border because it was simply not safe anymore. 2015 was a remarkable moment for the history of Doctors Without Borders because almost exactly 4 years ago, in October 2015, in Kunduz, an American gunship was bombing constantly a clinic of MSF in Kunduz, killing 42 people, including 14 of our staff, including doctors, nurses, logisticians, patients, caregivers, civilians. This is the hospital before the bombing, and that's the same corridor after the bombing here. This hospital was clearly marked as a hospital. It existed for about 4 years, so it was clearly an established health infrastructure. And just before tension in Kunduz increased, we also sent the coordinates of that clinic to all conflict parties, to the Taliban, to the American base in Kabul, and of course also the National Army of Afghanistan. Of course, this was quite a shock for us, so this is who did the shooting in the hospital. He came into the hospital without arms. And he was smart enough to know that we have, of course, checkpoints, and we have. They probably would have detected a gun. Yeah, so he came in unarmed, and then a companion threw a gun over the fence of the hospital, and he caught it and took the gun inside. The good news for us was that there was no mass shooting in the hospital. Also, it turned out it was a private revenge that happened. It was not an attack neither on the hospital nor on MSF, which for us was important, because if one of the cases would have happened, we would have to close down that mission. But of course, it was a major security incident, which we took very seriously. We called in psychologists, so every employee of our team could talk to psychologists. They could stay home for a while. It was for us a very important thing to see. And of course, in a conflict zone, even so there's a political or military conflict, that doesn't prevent also private conflicts to happen. So what are the challenges, coming back to the bigger scale? We believe that both NGOs, and this is not blaming militaries only, also some of the NGOs, we believe are not clear enough, first with their mandate and then with their way how they communicate. So we should be all more open and clear with dealing with these interactions and putting the limits, what we can do and what we cannot, but also towards the population. Clearly in Afghanistan today, if someone gets sick, finding a hospital is difficult to be treated. Sometimes they find a hospital and then getting treatment is good, but when they get out of the hospital, it's getting more difficult, because then they have a stamp on their, invisible stamp on their head saying, you have been treated there or there, and that sometimes means for them coming home, they're not independent and free anymore, because they have been with the enemy. And the enemy could be an NGO, the enemy could be a Western party, a Western military hospital, or Taliban or whatever. And that we observe over the years now, and some of the patients decide deliberately to stay at home, because they say the hustle and the pressure I feel coming out of our hospital is even bigger than I don't go there in the first place. So it does matter if medical care is independent and impartial, or at least if it's clear to the actors in which way they act. That's what we mean. Dealing with the consequent security of working within the same political framework, because it is tempting. Many of those soldiers maybe come from even the same country. They have been trained at similar universities, and we are now strangers as international workers or militaries in a country. So there is a lot we share in common. But at the same time, we share very few in common, at least from our point of view with MSF, because we say the mandate is so different that we have to stay distinct. We have to stay separated from you. So yes, we should communicate better, but for us, we don't see a way to collaborate, because that would make our life and the life and survival of our patients even harder. And so also we hope that the military action or military actors do accept that whatever they do, even if it's a medical act, it is a medical act, and it can be brilliant, it can be very good and life-saving, it is not neutral, independent, impartial. So by chance, because every military, of course, is a political wing of whichever state they belong to, it cannot follow the principles of humanitarian aid. And there's not a single moment when I meet militaries when they try to blur that line and say, we still, even the German army said, we do military aid in Afghanistan. And it takes a while for me, and then they say, we know it's not really humanitarian aid following the principle, but it sounds so good, and the phrase is so nice, so we want to use it anyway. So this is difficult for us. So to conclude, do we have the same motivation to work in a country? Maybe, we don't know. That may be individually different. Clearly, if we ask ourselves, do we have the same purpose? No, we don't, because the work we do as a medical actor is very different to a military actor. Even so, if we sometimes maybe even do a similar medical act, it's a very different concept. And now I'm very happy to discuss with you. We have Stefan Prevost here, the office leader of our Moscow office, and we are happy to discuss with you all things concerned MSF, but also the things we discussed here. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Tankred, for the interesting and sometimes heartbreaking presentation. So, colleagues, we move to the MQ section. So, just please speak with the microphone if you want to ask us a question. Yeah.
That's right. First of all, Doctor, thank you for your brilliant presentation. It was quite interesting and deep to know about MSF activities. And my question is quite short and might be quite simple, especially in the case we have our office headmaster here. So, who are people who work for MSF? What are their background? Are they all medical workers? And does MSF need anyone without medical background?
Yeah, I mean, given the name, Doctors Without Borders, some people believe MSF is consisting only of doctors, which of course wouldn't be much sense. If the car breaks down, I'm probably the worst person to ask to fix that car. Globally, we have about half of our staff is medical, doctors, nurses, psychologists, and the other one is non-medical, logistics, finance people, HR coordinators, whatever. So yes, we do need people who bring in expertise that's not medical, including advisory positions that we have, because even so we don't comment on political issues because of our neutrality and independence. Of course, for us it is crucial in every context we work, in every conflict area, that we have a very, very good understanding. Because we believe only if we have that, we can do a rather safe mission. And of course, it is a dilemma for us to say, on the one hand, more than half of our missions are in conflict areas or just post-conflict, and at the same time claiming the safety and security for our staff is number one priority. And because that is a dilemma. That to say, because if you go to the safety and security of staff, we shouldn't be in those countries. But we know that the medical needs in those countries are extremely high, and almost perversely, the number of organizations sort of being busy in those areas is very, very slim. So we believe we have to deal with that dilemma, and we deal with that every day. And there are missions where we have security briefings 3 times a day, plus on ad hoc basis when we are called in. It's these negotiated security negotiations. So I don't want to do active recruitment here, but if you're interested, go to the website and you find more information about this.
It will be best if you speak with the mic.
Or we repeat the question then.
Hi, many thanks for your presentation, and my question would be, how do you assess the security threshold? So what should be the security situation for you to withdraw from the mission? And also the second question...
Repeat, it wasn't clear the first question.
So my question is about the security, level of the security required for you to start the mission or to stop it. So how do you assess, is there some security threshold? question would be connected to this one. Do you cooperate with the militaries in order to assess the security situation? And do you coordinate this information to the militaries if you have some relevant information as well? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Very good questions. One is sort of, do we have a security threshold? Yes, we have. I mean, there is no country at the moment where we say we do not work there. But there are areas where we don't work. Clearly, and this is not, if there is a military actor or whatever actor who says, if MSF, if you come in, we're going to hound you, we're going to get you down, and we're going to kill you, surely we will not go to that area. If we get, and that's why I said the understanding of what happened with the shooting in Yemen, for us it's crucial. If our analysis would have shown that this is a target on MSF, we would take consequences and probably leave that area, which happened in Afghanistan back in 2004, and then in Somalia in 2013, when we realized that the threshold and the acceptance of MSF and humanitarian work is so low that we cannot, that the balance between the risk we take for our employees is too high, but we know each time, and it happened in Afghanistan and in Somalia, when we leave a country, this has devastating results for the patients. We know that in Somalia, for example, the day after we have left, tuberculosis patients who needed treatment were chased out of the hospital and were certainly not having a chance of survival. So these are very difficult, probably one of the hardest decisions we can take. But clearly, if we feel that acceptance of our work is not there anymore, I mean, the reason to work is the medical needs, but that's everywhere where we are. So this is not usually negotiable, but we see if security becomes too much of an issue, we have to take consequences. Your second question about cooperating with militaries in order to check security. I mean, what we hope is that if in an area when the military actor there, whether state or not, and they are planning any kind of activity which maybe results in more casualties or even coming closer to the clinic, if they would inform us, we would appreciate that. But there is no steady line, at least not in the countries I know, between constant backups of military activities. Yeah? I mean, usually militaries don't want to share that, first thing. Secondly, we don't need to know all that. What we do know is guarantees, or at least assurance by those actors that they don't attack hospitals, doctors, ambulance cars. So they should actively protect us, because then we are seen also as part of one part of the conflict. But at least stay away from anything that's medical and humanitarian.
I have a question for you, by the way. What are your relations with the local authorities? Maybe in your experience you had some cases where local authorities try to disturb or block your mission or activity.
I mean, in a conflict, of course, sometimes conflict parties, they know if an international actor like MSF comes in, they feel uncomfortable because by the fact that we also witness what happens, of course they're sometimes not overwhelmingly positive about this. In reality, we always try to have a good access and a good collaboration, usually with the Minister of Health, because that's our direct interlocutor. But there are occasionally missions where we say, even so we don't have the approval of the state, but if the medical needs and humanitarian needs are very much there, we also would find ways to work in that country, even so if that line is not established. But of course, these are rare exceptions, if nothing else works.
And who's the security staff in the hospital? Usually, security staff is provided by the local authorities.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on each case. In Libya, the thing was that there was a chief security manager for the hospital, which was part of the concept of the hospital. who was a military himself, but he was a very experienced, mature man. So for him to explain him what we discussed here tonight, that already took a while, but because for him security meant it's me and the soldiers here. So to get him understand our concept of a weapon-free hospital, that already took some time, and I didn't blame him, because this is his way of viewing security. And cynically, I have to say cynically, it helped my argument that people got killed in the hospital because of stray bullets of soldiers in that hospital. So I had a very acute example to discuss with him and say, yeah, I don't want it to sound right here, but just see what happened here today. And we believe without weapons in the hospital, those patients would have been saved. Yeah. So, and as I said, it took weeks. It was almost at the end of my mission there in the hospital when I saw him. He's sending out sort of soldiers from the emergency room who were not sick, but just accompanying a wounded colleague. And he really sort of took the idea and took out the soldiers with weapons. I almost started crying because I didn't believe that this would ever happen. But it sometimes does happen. And in places like Afghanistan, our precondition to work in those hospitals was to say they need to be weapon-free. Yeah. So usually what we do we have guards, but they're not armed. Yeah. And you could say, yeah, maybe is that helpful? We believe if everyone knows we are not a target and we shouldn't be a target, for us this is still the best concept we have.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Do you have your own military advisors in your MSF?
Our own military what?
Military advisors.
Advisors, consultants.
Well, we don't have military advisors. We do have security advisors. Usually these are experienced MSFers who have worked in conflict areas for a long time. And our concept is sort of, if we, by talking to all military groups or conflict groups in an area, we draw our conclusions about security and safety in that area. And that can lead to the result that we say we either have to limit, we stay at home, or we have to withdraw some of the stuff, sometimes all, the entire international stuff. But in most cases it is possible, and as I said, in all the conflicts we see in the world at the moment, MSF is active. And Yemen, for example, Yemen at the moment is the third biggest mission of MSF in the world. We have a budget for Yemen of 60 million euro for Yemen alone. And that is, by some, is regarded as the biggest humanitarian crisis we have currently after Syria. It does work, but it's difficult to say, because with those developments we are deeply concerned about security and safety of our staff.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I have a short question. You mentioned that the third biggest mission is in Yemen and the first biggest mission is in Syria. So I wonder, in which country is the second biggest mission of MSF? Thank you.
Yeah. No, Syria is not the fourth biggest. No. This is the definition. It's not MSF. We would never define what's the world's biggest humanitarian crisis because we believe those rankings don't help. Of course, what we can measure is where are we active and to which degree. So Yemen is number 3. Number 1 and 2 for many years, it's either South Sudan or Congo. Yeah. So these two countries are our top winners each year. Yeah. DRC, as you know, with Ebola, the second biggest Ebola outbreak in history, with more than 2,000 deaths in eastern Congo. And in eastern Congo, of course, we learned a lot in Western Africa, in the big Ebola outbreak with more than 11,000 people dead in Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia. We learned a lot, and even sort of we lost thousands of people, and some of them we probably could have saved if the world would have reacted stronger and earlier in West Africa. As a positive outcome was a vaccination that is not fully approved yet, but it's pretty safe to use. But all the concepts of isolating patients, of treating them well in a hospital, what we learned and experienced in West Africa, very little of that we can use in Congo, because in Congo is not only a deadly Ebola outbreak, but also a civil war. And quite a few people in Congo say, you know, we are suffering this war for a long, long time, and now health agencies or other agencies come in just because of Ebola. For us, Ebola is not a problem. We care about the war. And the mistrust in Congo against almost all public institutions, including hospitals, is so big that people don't come to the hospitals. So everything we learned in isolating patients in our hospitals, we have to think again, because we realize they don't come. They refuse to come to hospitals, so we have to find concepts how we find them in their homes, treat them at home, which is of course much, much harder and more, sort of from an infectious point of view, much more difficult. And South Sudan, of course, is a country constantly at war. Even after independence in 2011, this country hardly has seen a phase of stability or peace. There is civil war after civil war raging through the country. One of the worst health indicators, if we look at child mortality rates, pregnant mothers dying, malaria outbreaks. So these countries are constantly very high on the list. And then in the lower parts, then come Yemen, Syria, Central African Republic, and others.
I saw the question over there. Yep.
Thank you for the presentation. I have two questions. How would you clarify your status in Lugansk and LNL, those republics, let's say? Because what I've heard that you were not allowed to work there, and so what I mean, how do you play in these politically difficult combinations? Because if we speak about LNR, will you have to accept their sort of particular status, and how would you construct your relationships with this regard with the Ukraine government? It's first question, and second question.
Can you say again? I didn't understand the name of that area you mentioned.
Eastern Ukraine.
Eastern Ukraine. Okay.
Lugansk People's Republic and Donetsk People's Republic.
And the second question, how do you work with the other humanitarian actors like International Committee of the Red Cross? Whether you use their security information on
Okay, I will answer your first question first. Your second question first, because that's MSF is sometimes regarded as arrogant because we are not part at many coordination levels with the UN. We are not part of the cluster system of the UN, for example, for reasons which we experience that it's not working in the way we expect bodies like this to work. We do collaborate very well with ICRC. We share the same principles. So ICRC and MSF in the field, we have good collaborations. We are very pragmatic there. If there is another organization in the field, of course we talk to them and try to avoid any duplication of work. If there's a non-medical actor, of course we are happy if they can look at water sanitation issues. And also if we see that, for example, in Bad Aceh after the tsunami, or in Haiti, in Port-au-Prince, if there's an overwhelming presence of other NGOs, we try to find other areas of work where sometimes it's maybe more difficult to go. That's the pragmatic thing. Eastern Ukraine, I have to say I'm not an expert on that area to say something about that. Stefan, would you be able to say something?
Hello, I'm Stefan, the director for the MSF Moscow office. And so I know better about Ukraine because I was the country director for MSF in Ukraine during from 2014 to 2016. So to answer your question, we don't usually have to recognize the status of any, unrecognized states or new states created by armed groups. MSF does not have the legitimacy for this. What we do is we get in touch with the people, we discuss with them, and we negotiate with the de facto authorities or local authorities. We negotiate access for us to the patients. So for us, it's not about recognizing DNR or LNR. It's just to agree with them on the terms for our teams to get access to the patients. So this worked well until 2015, at which point some of those people over there decided that they did not want to have MSF teams in the territories under their control anymore. And ever since, there's been discussions, some of them still going, for us to be able to resume our medical operation in that part of Ukraine. There was a second aspect to your question. How do we discuss such issues with central authorities such as the ones in Kiev? Well, it's essentially the same. We go to meet with the relevant people at the government, and we sit down with them and we explain what we are hoping to achieve, which is to bring medical assistance to the people who need them. And we make our situation as clear and as transparent as possible, and we take it from there. I hope this answers the question.
So you haven't worked in Donbass, I couldn't understand.
Yes, we worked in Donbass, as I said. We worked until, first of all, we had a mission in Donbass, in Donetsk, which was a program to fight against tuberculosis in the local prison system. This was, the base was in Donetsk. And unfortunately, we had to stop this program in the fall of 2015. So you see, we continued with this program despite the conflict which appeared. In parallel, when it became obvious, and this was very early in May of 2014, when it became obvious that the local population would have needs related or resulting from the conflict, we started what we called emergency operations. So we brought medical assistance to the people who needed it, while continuing with our tuberculosis program. As I explained, but I will say again, by the end of summer 2015, the local authorities decided to tell us to go away. It happens, yes. So what we do when this happens, we continue to negotiate with them and with people who might give us insights about how to go back and to resume our operations. Yes? Is that clear enough?
Yes. Don't you know the reason why they asked you to leave?
Well, this was never formally explained to us. We never received a formal explanation in the form of a letter or otherwise. Nobody bothered telling us. If you will have more questions about specific issues or about MSF in general, you are welcome to contact us at the address which is here, 16 Mara Dimitrovka. That's where we have an office. We also have colleagues working with us who manage the medical program currently in Arkhangelsk. It's also a program in collaboration with local health authorities to help fight against tuberculosis. And finally, if some of you is interested to be working with MSF, we will have a presentation, I think it's December 12th?
Yes, exactly.
We will have a presentation, an information evening, as we call them, December 12th. What is the venue?
So it's called Tversky 15, it's like their open space, public space. So if you want to have more information, just go to our social media channels, msf.org or msf.russian. So all information about HR, and I remember there was the question about like what are the backgrounds for the people who want to work with MSF. So you are free to go there and to know the details about that.
So
yeah.
Yes, you can find us on Facebook, on Contact, on Instagram, on Twitter. There's an MSF presence in Russian, and we also have a website in Russian which presents all the material available in English. We translate to Russian. So somebody who would be interested to get to know more about MSF, about our programs, about the past, the history, it should not be it should not be difficult for you to find more. As I said, the information evening, we will have somebody explaining you how to apply for MSF, what are the skills required, what does it look like to be working with MSF. Some parts of it is very exciting, some part of it is quite challenging. Not everybody finds it very easy to work with MSF, but it's also an interesting way to use your skills and abilities if you are so inclined. Okay, thank you very much. And we thank the RIAC for giving us this opportunity to meet with new people and speak about our mission. And also Dr. Nikita, thank you very much for introducing us here today. And finally, Dr. Tankred for this excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So, if you don't mind, I saw the last question over there, but yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there was another question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
the final one.
Yeah. Dr. Tankred, thank you for presentation, and I want to give a little feedback because myself I'm working in Africa, and I met these guys from Médecins Sans Frontières, and they are most really brave guys and hard parters. I mean, they party hard and really cool people and really brave. And actually, everything was already discussed, but I want to ask you one thing. What do you think about the impact of UN mission, for example? Because in Congo, in the Congo is already for 20 years they exist there. So, I mean, what is your position? How do they work? How are they? Are they good? Or
What do you think of the UN, how they work?
Well, that's a challenging question. Well, I could give you a stark example when we disagree. Two quick examples. One was Haiti in 2010. As you know, there was this terrible earthquake in Haiti, sort of killing tens of thousands of people, and then consecutively dozens of NGOs and organizations rushed onto the island to help. So half a year later, there was a great network of different organizations established in Haiti, and you could think this is the perfect moment for another disaster to hit the island. We do collaborate. We do use. We share data. We meet together. We try to get the best out of any conflict where we work together. But these two examples, I'll just give you in case you wonder why we are not part of the cluster or any other bigger UN collaboration schemes, because our experience is that the hands-on work in the countries, the strengths of MSF is to employ and involve extremely quick, good help in case of disaster, and we believe we can do that better outside the UN frame.
Oh, no, yeah, now I see we finally ran out of questions. So I'd like to say thanks again, Dr. Stoebe, for your interesting and useful presentation. And I'd like to say thanks to the audience for your active participation. Hopefully the presentation will be beneficial for everyone. So thanks again.
Thank you.